Wow. Okay, this is fine. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'm Marian Poeppelmeyer, daughter of Marian Pierce Hawgood, one of the 44 victims of that tragic flight. And I'm just gonna pause a little bit. I can see clearly with my glasses on, I can't, you're all foggy. So if I do like this, just don't mind me. I want to thank my cast and everyone who's been a part of this, and for honoring the victims. I'm joined tonight by my husband. My sister Nancy was 14 months old. She says 16 months, but calendar-wise it's 14, 15 months old at the time. My children and their spouses. It's meant a lot to me to have you here with me. Our story is only one of 44 others whose families were forever changed by this devastating act. So let me begin. I have a speech here planned, hopefully. I may segue off it, but I like to begin. You know, in every mass killing or violent crime, media attention swirls around the crime and the criminal. But when the headlines fade, it is the families who remain, left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The emotional and financial toll is devastating, and the trauma ripples silently through generations, wreaking destruction in its path. However, it is not just the families who suffer. The communities where these tragedies happen bear scars for decades. My story bridges both sides of Flight 629, the surviving families and the unsung heroes who rallied in the cold and dark during one of the most extraordinary search and recovery missions in our nation's history. My hope is that this journey brings healing and inspiration to all of us, that even in the face of bitter tragedy, we can be overcomers. I think I need a glass of water. I forgot. Thank you. So, that's all right. Mike, I'm going to set the scene. As we know, we're going to take you back. November 1st, 1955 began as a normal day. In Weld County, Longmont, and Denver areas, farmers worked their fields. Children went to school. Businesses like the historic Johnson's Corner on Highway 25 bustled as usual, and it was a quiet winter's day, and all was well. But across the country, in Philadelphia, my mother, Martha Hobgood, 6 months pregnant with me, drove my father, Marian Pierce Hobgood, to the airport. He was an electrical engineer for the Philco company, and out of 2 candidates, he was chosen for a long-term project in Portland, Oregon. Even though Philco knew that that his wife was expecting another child, they opted to send him anyway. That morning, she waved goodbye as his plane took off, expecting to see him in a few weeks, as he would be gone for weeks on end. Underneath, though, as she was waving goodbye, She had an extreme foreboding feeling that kept lingering inside her. She did not have a good feeling about this one, and she did not want him to go. As we know, taking you back to that evening at 7:03 p.m. Mountain Time, everything changed. The quiet beet fields northwest of Denver became the epicenter of a national tragedy. Hundreds of citizens from Weld County and the Longmont area dropped everything. Farmers, teenagers, businessmen, funeral directors, a baseball team, and local organizations like Johnson's Corner and the Longmont American Legion Post 32 rallied on the fields without hesitation. They dropped everything. Together with the FBI, Civil Aeronautics Board, Denver Police, and firemen, they launched one of the most intense search and recovery efforts ever seen. Meanwhile, I'm taking you back to Philadelphia. That very same night, after tucking Nancy into bed, our mother went to bed early, because she was extremely exhausted. She was short, about 5 feet, 6 months pregnant with me, and she waddled. She was very tired. And she didn't watch the nightly news as she usually would. However, at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, she was startled awake by the sound of pebbles hitting her upstairs bedroom window where she slept. She looked out and saw her OBGYN, her pastor, and our father's best friend standing below, frantically hollering and waving for her attention. She rushed down the stairs as fast as a pregnant woman could, and at the same moment the phone rang. It was her sister in Tennessee who had just seen the nightly news. Together, they delivered the unthinkable, that Marian, or Hobby as my mom called him, would never be coming home again. Our mother ran back upstairs in horror, grabbed baby Nancy from the crib, and held her close, screaming gut-wrenching cries into the night. Her nightmare had begun. She and my father had just purchased their first home in Hatfield, a quiet suburb of Philadelphia. Because of a prior Philco assignment, he had only lived in that home for less than 3 months. Mr. Deep grief and pain the following days and weeks. Fear of losing the house and raising 2 children alone haunted her. Besides taking care of the funeral and everything else, she had to start paying the bills, figuring things out. And she calculated she had enough money, $50 a month, to last 6 years. After that, she'd either have to work or remarry. At that time, her friends and family dropped everything to help her, and her friends came on the scene immediately after the news and made her funeral black maternity dress to wear. Others took baby Nancy to watch her around the clock. However, our paternal grandmother on our dad's side, on Marian Hobgood's side, in her extreme grief over losing her favorite son, and unmoved by our mother's dire situation, refused to hand over and release $10,000 in veterans' life insurance from World War II that had never yet been transferred over to my mom. I later found letters written by my mother desperately pleading for those funds. I felt her pain as I read them. I cried with her as I imagined how she cried and cried and cried as I read them, as she wrote them. She did not deserve this added anguish. Because of her severe stress, I was born prematurely on December 28, 1955, and she opted to name me after my dad. They had chosen another name, but they named me after him. As if that wasn't enough, within 6 weeks of my birth, her own mother died. 2 profound losses within 3 months. After a year of grieving with her father in Virginia, she returned to the Hatfield home, alone, determined, but quietly resilient, never carrying any bitterness. And yet, I didn't hear her full story until I was 42 years old. By the time I was 6, our mother did indeed remarry, and we now had a dad. However, he could not fully love us as he should have as a real dad. He just couldn't do it. And he was the opposite of our real father from all that I was told and all that I knew in my heart. He became a rageaholic. I learned to walk on eggshells, afraid of triggering his anger. He wouldn't allow my mother to tell us anything about our real dad. Any mention of him sent him into a rage. I remember him screaming at my mom a lot whenever mail arrived still addressed to our real dad, as if it was her fault. He would also shout, "Marty, they're your girls." He didn't even provide for our food or needs either, as I learned as I was a young adult growing up. I always wondered why my mom carried 2 wallets in her purse. So thus, I could not openly talk about our dad. And so my father, Marian Pierce Hobgood, remained a huge mystery to me. To survive growing up, I subconsciously buried myself in studies and found comfort in achievement. And we felt justified as a family, knowing the man who committed this atrocity had received the death penalty. But was that really consolation? Life went on for me: college, marriage, children, ministry, but crisis after crisis, loss after loss. My husband encountered long-term unemployment. All of this eroded my footing. And by age 40, I hit a standstill, and I totally shut down. Emotionally exhausted, I cried unceasingly for weeks. My prayer was simple: a job for my husband, our marriage restored, and I wanted to be able to cope in life again. Ironically though, during this season, I began to miss my biological father very, very deeply. I began to wonder, who was he? What kind of man had he been? What did his voice sound like, because I never heard his voice? Did he love me? I began to miss his hugs, his laughs, the glimmer of the Father's eye for me. However, I was still clueless that my dad's death had anything to do with why I broke down, nor that God was inviting me to be free from the emotional baggage, the ripple effect of Flight 629. That year, I began to really search to know my earthly father, and the more I began to want to search to know him and ask questions, the more God touched my broken heart. And as the Holy Spirit began to heal me, something quite unexpected happened. See, I prided myself on loving all other people, on accepting all other and being happy and loving and caring, being the good girl. However, something totally unexpected happened during the season, and the grief anger, and hatred I had repressed for decades surfaced. For the first time in my life, I realized all that was stolen from us. A loving, forgiving, kind man who adored his wife and children. This evil act impaired me, damaged me emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. I grew to vehemently, outwardly hate the man who placed the bomb. I loathed him. And this hatred and anger churned inside me and brewed. These emotions spilled into our marriage. Bless my husband, he stood by me. And our once happy union teetered on the edge of divorce. I only knew, because we had faith, we're Christians. The only thing I knew to do, and the only one I knew who could put me back together again was Jesus. So I clung to him for healing and hope. 3 years into the dark nights of the soul, after much wrestling, I went to a prayer meeting. And God, over time, he kept nudging me to forgive the man who killed my dad. I kept saying, no, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. Well, this one night, he nudged me to forgive him and said, why do you fear that which cannot take your soul? And I realized that I was fearing forgiving the man who killed my dad. That I was fearing him more than God, who was the author of life. And to be honest, I didn't have that in me to do that. I did not want to, nor could I. I couldn't ever say his name, which is absolutely true, I never could, and I still don't. But living a life of bitterness, hatred, and anger was not an option for me. So I did what I only knew to do. And I asked God, I told him I can't do it. I was gut level honest with God, I don't want to. I hate what he did. He stole from us. So I asked God for his help. And that night, in return, as I asked him, he gave me the grace and mercy to do so. So instead of a rehearsed, this is true, I had a rehearsed ranting speech going on in my mind during the season of my utter brokenness. And I re-enumerated it over in my mind. I'm going to say, you know, so-and-so, you took, you ruined our family, destroyed our family, blah, 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 and I forgive you. That's what I wanted to say. Okay. But I was utterly shocked. And instead of this ranting speech in my mind, as I opened my mouth, all of a sudden these words came out. So-and-so, I still don't want to say his name. So-and-so, you thought you killed my real dad, but you didn't. My real father is a heavenly Father, and I forgive you. And in that moment, Jesus forgave me too for harboring such anger and hate. And a heavy weight lifted, and I was finally free and emotionally untangled. Forgiving released me to live. The search to know my earthly dad led me to my real father. I discovered whose I am. Because what I didn't share with you, I was very rejected. I felt rejected all the time, abandoned all the time. I thought my husband was going to leave me or he was going to die on me. I had a lot of fears, a lot of worries. All of that vanished. And through this process, I discovered whose I am, and I've never been the same since. As a side note, the 3 things that I prayed about, our marriage did get restored, my husband did get a job, and I did gain the ability to cope in life once again. And, yeah, thank you, Jesus, you did that. It was amazing. You know, Scripture says, he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Profoundly set free by his grace in 1998. I asked God to make my dad's life count. I wanted to know I didn't want him to have died in vain. And I prayed that out of the rubble of Flight 629, something good would emerge so that others going through tragedy could know that there is hope for them too. It took me another 20 years to write my book. I just brought a copy of it up here. There's copies over there. All my notes in it. Took me 20 years to write my story. Finding my father beyond tragedy, through trauma, and into freedom. To pass on the healing that I received, I became certified in trauma recovery through a Christian Lighthouse Counseling Service Center by a woman who had been counseling very difficult cases for over 40 years. So I became certified through her because I really wanted to help other people. I interned as a pastoral counselor and I trained as a chaplain. More recently, I created an online healing community to help others live a life of freedom, free from their bitter tragedies and broken and wounded past. Well, little did I know that God, though, had far greater plans than just my healing and my life. Unexpectedly, by 2022, doors opened for me to travel to the epicenter in Weld County for a final resolution. Because I had forgiven the killer, I could finally come to your beautiful state of Colorado and Denver. If I hadn't forgiven that man, I could never even have come, and I probably would not have come even tonight. With the help from the late Rick Salinger of CBS 4 Denver, I met Rick Tittle, who introduced me to Conrad and Martha Hopp. Now, Rick Tittle, since 7 years old, he was near the farms, and his mom told him the story. So since 7 years old, he's been wanting a memorial for Flight 629. And he might be here tonight. I hope he is. But Rick Tittle, oh, is he? He's right there. Rick, yeah. And that was the greatest thing that Rick Salinger had done. He had done a documentary on this in, his 60th year, I think, and that's how I discovered that Conrad and Martha Hopp were alive. And when I saw that documentary, as I was researching, my book was kind of in publication process, and I discovered the documentary. So I wrote Rick Salinger and thanked him for that documentary because it had been long forgotten. No one was ever talking about it. And through that documentary, I discovered that Conrad and Martha Hopp, who were the first on the beat fields at 18 years old, I wept and I cried and cried and cried that day. So in 2022, after Rick kept encouraging me, the pandemic happened, so I didn't want to come with a mask on. I didn't want to do that. So finally, 2022, doors opened up and we could finally come. And on that trip in 2022, Conrad and Martha Hopp took us to stand on those beet fields. And I was able to say a goodbye at last. That year, we also met Jeff Anastasio of ABC 7 Denver. I don't know if he's here tonight. He was throughout the whole event. I was able to meet him, and he's done an excellent job documenting Flight 629 in his memorial. When I researched my book, I saw the most powerful example in the American spirit on the beet fields. See, I didn't want to devote, not a page of my book is devoted to the case or the crime. My book is written to help people get through their trauma through my story. But I had to research it, and so scene 4, chapter 4 talks about what happened in Denver. So as I researched it, I realized it was the most powerful example of the American spirit I'd ever seen. Hundreds of average, ordinary citizens worked tirelessly in unity with the FBI, CAB, and law enforcement. Gripped by their courage and sacrifice, in front of 5 town hall meetings in 2022, when we were coming out, I was able to finally thank the communities for what their ancestors had done for my father and the other victims in 1955. I thought if I would just go in front of the town halls and do a YouTube blog and thank them, that would be what I would do. But I contacted Johnstown Town Hall and asked, what should I do? And the town clerk said, Marian, do presentations in front of 5 town halls, and then ask for a proclamation for November 1st. So that's what I did. I contacted them before our trip and got 5 town hall meetings where I was able to thank the communities. I thought that would be it though. I've also longed, which I'll tell you more, I've also longed for a memorial, not just for the passengers who were killed, but also for the unsung nameless heroes of Weld and Boulder counties. These brave individuals represent the best of America, and their legacy must be shared as an inspiration for present and future generations. They fiercely did what I could not. They found my dad, covered my dad, guarded my dad from the looters, and transported him to the makeshift morgues of the Greeley State Armory. Eyewitnesses told me the search and recovery did not end the next morning as usually has been reported. Area residents worked tirelessly for weeks, even months and years, clearing debris scattered across the fields and roads. They sacrificed their time and energy, pushing aside their own trauma from what they experienced to clean up the aftermath, stuffing the memories and horror that they encountered. Since 2022, I now consider Colorado my second home, as we have made many, many wonderful friends. My family is knit forever with Conrad and Martha Hopp. You know, I didn't even know if they wanted to meet me, for they had been equally traumatized. They haven't talked much about this. They were equally traumatized from the other side, the side of the rescuers. And our reunion brought both sides of the tragedy full circle in a very beautiful, unexplainable bond, bringing further healing to all of us who separately carried the horrors of Flight 629 alone. And since 2022, I've returned several times. I'm not telling this to brag, I'm telling you that I'd asked God to make my dad's life count. Remember that statement? And little did I know that doors would be opening up where I could come and tell my story to the very area that was so wounded and scarred. They didn't even talk about it for decades. Decades. No one in Weld County talked about it, no one in the area talked about it. I come on the scene and all of a sudden doors are opened up for me to speak. So I've spoken at events, I've heard stories, I've met many people who are living at the time of Flight 629. I met the Flycoat Tower, the restaurant owners, Mike Hess with the Denver Police Museum, History Colorado. I've been interviewed with TV, radio, and local newspapers. And how I stand here before you, before families who are severely and equally, if not more, shattered by Flight 629. And I stand before government authorities and entities who men and women were deeply involved. And before the communities whose sacrifices and scars from Flight 629 are not forgotten. My story, though deeply personal, is only one aspect of Flight 629. Tonight, we gather not just to remember the past, but to reflect on the present and to look toward healing for the future. I'm deeply troubled by the constant surge of violence in our cities. I'm gripped with every tragic incident that happens because I know what it's like to be on the other side, along with those families that suffer equally. So considering the recent surge of violence in our cities and the recent tragic assassination that occurred in our nation, it is clear our country is hurting and healing is desperately needed. Many of you in this room carry burdens that few can understand. You serve in roles that expose you daily to unspeakable trauma. All the police officers, first responders, FBI agents, firemen, National Guards members, and other groups that are not mentioned. Others, like me, come from families like you who intimately know the brutal, devastating ramifications of losing a loved one to such a heinous, evil act. Some of you may be grieving fresh losses. Others may be walking through silent storms of your own. Whatever your story may be, I want to leave you with this. There is hope, and his name is Jesus. My dad would always say to his mom, who feared him flying, he was from South Carolina. He'd go, "Mom, I know my maker, and when it's my time, I'm ready." I guess he was ready. My mother's faith carried her through the darkest season of her life. When I heard her story for the first time in 1997, unsolicited, she said, "Marian, I always felt sorry for Gloria Graham and her children. Somewhere there's your counterpart. It was born about the same year you were." That was her mom, full of compassion and not an ounce of bitterness. I don't know how she could have done it. She added wistfully, "Never a day has passed in 42 years that I haven't thought of your real dad. There was never a couple more in love than us." Her love for our dad never died. She finished with loving eyes. I'm looking at my sister. She said, "You and Nancy gave me a reason to go on living. I could not have gone on without you." She passed away a year later in 1998. As for our family, our faith saw us through our very turbulent years as I was going through massive inner healing from the loss of my dad, from its ripple effect in my life. God saw us through this, and I know without a doubt that Jesus brought us through, bringing peace, joy, and restoration to my family, and my weeping ceased. We may never fully understand why evil exists. We don't know why our loved ones were on that flight. And we'll never know. I quit asking that why question. We may never know why tragedy constantly exists. Why does it exist? We may never understand. But if we hold on to faith and seek God in our troubled times, we can find strength while in the storm. And if anyone is carrying pain or sorrow tonight, just simply reach out to God and you will find healing, comfort, and peace. I know this for a fact because that's all I did. I didn't have anything in me but to cry out to Him. And He met me where I was at. You see, in conclusion, the story is not just about loss, it's about redemption. It's about how a bitter tragedy can be transformed from ashes into beauty. It's about the heart of a nation can return to compassion, unity, love, and hope through the example of these Coloradian unsung heroes of 70 years ago. Thank you. I was given 15, 20 minutes to talk, so
Thank you, Marian. Thank you for sharing that powerful and touching, inspirational story. I mean, there's so much to that, and I know that that's echoed across many, many people, many families that are here with us tonight. So we have one last thing. It's a short video, 4-minute video, a tribute to the lives lost in Flight 629. So, we're